Redeem Academy.
Yo, what is up, science squirrels? Johnny here. This is Redeem Academy. I'm here to help you make the most of your education through content that gives God the glory he deserves. We are in our taxonomy unit now, starting lesson 2. We're going to be covering the 8 properties of life. I want to give a shout out today to our sponsor, the Danger Noodle. You should know that 6 out of 7 Danger Noodles are subscribed to Redeem Academy. And they say that if you really want to avoid getting bit in the ankles by a freaky albino rat snake, you should get a notebook to follow along at redeemacademy.org. Big question today. In a Christian worldview, what is the difference between biological life and spiritual life? All right, let's jump right in. There are 8 characteristics that living things exhibit. We don't exactly even know what it is that makes something alive. What is it to be alive? It's hard to define that characteristic. Here's an amoeba. It's a cute little, sometimes brain eating. I like the title of this video, Occasional Brain Eaters. Occasionally they eat brains, but it's just a little single cellular blob that's creeping across the slide in these videos. If you were to take one of these and you put it in a beaker, and you were then to take a couple of electrodes and attach them to that beaker and just run a current of electricity through that beaker, the blob would no longer keep moving, would no longer be alive. But all of its parts would still be there. But it would have lost something. It would no longer be alive. Now, scientists don't have the best grip on exactly what is it that it is to be alive. So instead of trying to define life exactly, the way we define life, or the way we characterize life in biology, instead is we say living things do these 8 things, okay? There are 8 things that living things do. So today's lesson, we're going to go through all 8 of them. Let's go to number 1. All right, here you see our notes, 8 properties of life. Option number 1, made of cells. You can see my little zoom bubble. I'm zoomed in on this teeny little circle right here, zooming in. And you can see that each little unit inside of this plant is a cell. And so this plant's leaf is made of cells. This whole plant is made of cells. So option number 1, or property number 1, if you're a living thing, you are made of cells. Now, like always, I have a cool video for this. Okay, I love this video. So they take a frog's egg that's been fertilized and they go time lapse, okay? So this is happening very fast. We see the first cell division after fertilization, then the second. Okay, so now we've gone from 2 to 4, and now we're at 8. And we just keep seeing these cell divisions over and over and over. We're looking at from the side now. Okay, so this is, like I said, a fertilized frog egg. And so frog eggs are big enough to see. And as it starts to divide over and over again, we go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64 to 256 to 512 to 1,098 or whatever it would be. Eventually the cells begin to get so small we can't see the cells anymore. And then the very first part of you that forms is your butt crack, right down here. Okay? And at the same time, your brain is forming, although you're not a frog, but this frog and all human embryos do pretty much the same thing. You form a spinal cord, okay? It's not really your butt crack, it's the bottom of your spinal cord. And so your spinal cord forms, and then your brain forms on top of that. And then there's this little bag down here, and it's called your yolk sac. Okay, so yolks are not just for eating breakfast. They're also for an embryo before it implants in its mother, if it's a mammal, or if it's a frog and it's developing in a pond. They're there for you to eat the food that was left behind for you to eat while you grow. And so we see this frog's head and its spinal cord and sort of what's going to become its tail, and then this big bulge is its yolk sac. We begin to see it on the side. Tadpoles are going to have gills, so those are probably going to be gills on the side. He might even start wiggling his tail here in a second. And you can see all this stuff flying around, like what's with all these tiny little things flying around? We're probably seeing, I don't know, 2 or 4 weeks of development in about 2 minutes. And so it's all going very fast as we're hitting the fast forward button. And that's why these things seem like they're wiggling way too fast. Okay, they're starting to be able to move. Okay, and then bam, they're tadpoles. Okay, and there we go. And look, now they have legs. They're going to go through a metamorphosis and become a full-blown frog that we can dissect in my classroom later. The point there is everything's made out of cells, and cells, when you first start to develop, you grow from cells and cells and cells and cells, and you turn into what you are. And the growing doesn't stop, so property of living things number 2, growth and development. So living things keep growing. Now, if you're an amoeba, you are only one cell, or if you're a bacteria, you are only one cell, but you'll actually start smaller, and as you grow and grow and grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, most single cellular things will then bloop, turn into 2 cells once they get too big. And if you're a baby iguana, like in our little picture right there, you will turn into a big iguana. Now, remember our baby iguanas? Let me give you just a little taste of a reminder of what I showed you in our first unit about the baby iguana. Aww. Remember this guy, just born, snakes want to kill him. He has to run for his life. Okay, they're looking for him. Oh yeah, the snakes, they want to kill the baby iguana. He runs for his life. He leaps to victory. And then later on, they turn into full-fledged grown marine iguanas, and they go swimming and they eat algae. And so you learned all about that in my What is Biology unit already. So here's a marine iguana. You'd think he'd be smart enough to eat those fish, but he goes right past all those delicious fish and he goes to eat some green algae on the bottom. But you see, he's grown into a full-blown marine iguana who's going to go eat algae off the bottom. All right, time for property of life number 3, organization. So in our picture right there, we see our little squirrel with an X-ray screen. That'd be so cool if such a thing actually existed. And you could see all of his internal organs totally organized. It can be multicellular creatures who are totally organized on the inside, or it can be single cellular creatures that have even organization within their simple little bodies. The organization there really speaks to the organization of the creature. But I thought of this bird video I wanted to show you, where this bird of paradise keeps his nest and his area so clean to show off, to try to impress a future mate. Check this out.
In the great island of New Guinea, there are 42 different species of birds of paradise, each more bizarre than the last.
Birds of paradise. You're not going to believe this bird, what it does. And it's always the males who are trying to impress the females. Kind of like watching middle school boys in a public middle school, honestly.
This forest is so rich that nourishing food can be gathered very quickly. That leaves the male six-plumed bird of paradise with time to concentrate on other matters, like tidying up his display area.
Keeps a very clean house.
Everything must be spick and span.
Spick and span.
All is ready.
He does a really nice dance. Check this out. You haven't seen it yet. That's just the beginning. Wait till the girl comes around.
But what does he have to do to really impress her?
Watch this. Oh, he makes some nice noises too. Here we go. Watch this. What? It's like a Halloween costume.
She retires to consider her verdict.
To consider her verdict. He's given it everything he's got.
It's hard not to feel deflated when even your best isn't good enough.
Oh, she was not impressed. What does this duck and her eggs have to do with anything? All living things must reproduce. I've got a favorite duck video that I want to show you. My pet duck Adam's first swim. Here you go.
This is my pet duck Adam going for his first swim. Be careful, Adam. Adam! Adam!
I guess Adam didn't like living in captivity. Time for number 5. All living things respond to stimuli. Stimuli is the plural of the word stimulus. Stimulus is to like poke something. So here's a good example of a stimulus. Every parent probably does this. I probably did this to all of my children. It's usually when you're in a restaurant. These parents are doing it at home. You're in a restaurant, and there's a lemon in your drink, and your baby's there with you. This is just good parenting.
Gavin, did you want some lemon? You want to try some bites? Try a big bite. Big bite, big bite. What do you think? Pretty good?
No.
You gonna try some more?
No. What did
No
you
more
just
lemon?
feed me?
No more lemon? No.
And that was the day Gavin stopped trusting his parents.
Emotional, damn it!
So that's an example of response to stimuli. So the sour flavor of a lemon, little baby Gavin, and all humans have taste receptors in their mouth to sense chemicals. Okay, we can respond to all kinds of stimuli. Let's write a few of them down. We are built to respond to temperature. We actually have temperature sensors. We have chemoreceptors. Okay, we can sense chemicals. We have pressure receptors as humans. We can sense light in our eyes. Even bacteria can have light-sensitive eye spots. We have the ability to sense sound. Okay, a lot of creatures have that ability. With pressure, you know, similar is vibration. And I'm sure the list goes on. And so any of these stimuli can be responded to by living things. All right, next up we have number 6 for you non-Spanish speakers.
Sí, señor, yes.
And it is the, what is this plant doing? Growing toward the sun for the purpose of energy. So whether you're a human like me and your main energy source is pizza, or you're a plant and your main energy source comes from the sun, you are trying to capture energy and use it. I just discovered this cool YouTube channel called Green Time Lapse. Subscribing, click. This video is so cool. So they're time-lapsing this, and they have light. They're showing you the direction the light's coming from, and the plants are growing toward the light. Did you know plants do this? They actually grow toward the light. And check this out, about halfway through the video, they're going to change the direction of the light. Whoa! And now the plants are growing in the other direction. That is wicked cool, man. And then he's going to show you what would happen if he had just had the light and it changes it back. They're like, man, come on. You are just yoinking us all around here. It looks what happens when we just have a normal amount of light in the environment. The plants just grow straight up versus the ones he grew with light going in both directions. What a cool idea for a YouTube channel. I can't imagine all the other videos he's got on there, but I hit subscribe so next time I search stuff up on YouTube, I get to see this guy's cool videos. All right, time for number siete, 7. Homeboy is running and sweating. Running is not a property of life. Sweating is not a property of life. What this represents is called homeostasis. Now, I don't have a beautiful YouTube video for this. You're just going to listen to me yap for a minute. So maybe you have a thing in your house called a thermostat. Okay, a thermostat looks something like this, and it gives you options like heat or AC or just turn on the fan. Most likely your mom and dad are like, don't touch that! This thing tells your house what temperature to keep itself at, so that your house is always about the right temperature. Now in America, where I live, and most of you probably live, we have this weird way of doing temperature where it's 70 degrees. Now in almost every other country around the world, it's like, I don't even know, 27 degrees or 30 degrees or something, because they do Celsius. But in Fahrenheit, we shoot for about 70 degrees. If it gets hot outside, if you're really lucky, you have air conditioning, and the air conditioning turns on, although some people, I live in Oregon, not everybody has air conditioning, but in other places like Arizona, it's probably like, no, you have to have air conditioning. But anyway, you'll have air conditioning turn on if it gets too hot, and it'll cool down the house, okay? Where I live in Oregon, we have all 4 seasons, so in the winter, it's cold, and in the summer, it's hot. But some people are cheap. Like my whole childhood, we didn't have air conditioning, so we just suffered. It was hot. But in the winter, we did have heat because it was too hot. If you live in a place where you have both, like my house now, we have both. We have air conditioning and heating. If the temperature gets too hot, the air conditioning kicks on, brings down the temperature of the house, okay? And then in the winter, when the temperature gets too cold, the furnace kicks on and brings up the temperature. And so your house is always about 70 degrees because the thermostat is measuring the temperature right where it's at, and then it's telling the furnace or the AC to kick on or kick off. Your body has the same thing. So your skin has temperature sensors all over it. And then in your brain, there's a special spot in your brain called the hypothalamus, and it keeps really close awareness of your body temperature. And in American units, 98.6 degrees is the body temperature we try to stay at, okay? If you're ever sick, your mom or dad might take your temperature and be like, oh no, you're at 100, you're at 101, you're sick. I've never been below body temperature, but if you accidentally fall into an icy lake, you might go like 96, 95 degrees, okay? And you're hypothermic then. Yeah, that's right. I just had to think about that for a second. And so your body, if you get cold, it does this thing where it goes, and you start to shiver. Or if you get hot, you get water all over your skin. And the water, when it evaporates, it takes more than its fair share of your body heat away. It actually makes you feel colder. And so sweating is a really good way to lose body heat. Dogs and a lot of animals, they only lose heat from their mouth. So they, I mean, you just do that right now. You can feel your mouth feels a little colder as you breathe through it rapidly. And it's weird, but like dogs and most animals, they only lose body heat through panting, or maybe they have big ears, like certain animals in the desert have big ears, like elephants, and they lose a lot of body heat through their ears. But sweating is a really good way to lose body heat. And so this ability to keep your body temperature right where it's supposed to be is an example of homeostasis, keeping things constant. There's another thing we keep constant that maybe some of you have heard of. Our blood sugar has to be very constant. We tend to want to keep our blood sugar around 80, but like if you're just jamming Jolly Rancher candy, like Jolly Rancher candy is my favorite candy. Let me show you. Okay, every once in a while there's a special grocery store in my town where they sell like a giant $6 bag of these things, and I just break down and buy one and eat them all in like 3 days. It's bad. And when I do this, my blood sugar just goes, it starts going way up. But there's a hormone that my pancreas secretes, which is this big yellow thing, and it squeezes a bunch of insulin into my blood, and then my blood sugar comes back down where it should be to some degree. You know, maybe it's up at 90 or 100, because my body is maintaining homeostasis of my blood sugars, okay? Some people have a problem with this, and they have got the diabetes, okay? And maybe you've seen the guy who tells you, you need to buy your diabetes testing supplies. I don't remember what that guy's name. He had a nice mustache. He's probably not around anymore. But we have all kinds of things in our bodies that we are keeping constant, whether it's our blood sugar, our body temperature, a lot of things in our blood, salts, fats, all kinds of things. And so all living things are keeping some things constant. And the big fancy word for that is called homeostasis. Yapping complete. All right, last one. Number 8, evolution. Now remember, not that kind of evolution. Notice how I have a picture of a wolf turning into 2 different kinds of dogs. There are limits to change, but populations do change over time. Dogs turn into other dogs. Mind blown. But if you're a creationist, then you say, yeah, God made populations and they can adapt to new environments, but there are limits to how much they can change. And so living things do change over time. Now, guess what? Evolutionists made the 8 properties of life. Do we really need to talk about evolution to talk about a living thing being alive? No. But people in their hearts, they love evolution so much, they've added it to the list. And I think it's fine to talk about it because it is good as Christians to talk about evolution and to come to a good biblical understanding of evolution. Yeah, populations do change, okay? That doesn't really have anything to do with living things being alive, because one living thing doesn't evolve. So why'd they add it to the list? Because they love evolution, because they're evolutionists. But we can put it in there and remind you Christian kids to understand, yeah, evolution happens in populations, but there are limits to it. Now, look at the notes. Right in the middle here is a picture of a virus. Let me show you how a virus works. All right, here we go. So this is a virus, and it's bam, gonna land on a cell, inject its own DNA in that cell, and borrow that cell's machinery to replicate itself and make copies of itself. I don't know what that tennis ball is, okay? And then, look, it's making parts that look like little virus heads in there. I don't know what that big green blob is. Okay, more of the virus DNA maybe. It's getting freaky in there. I don't know what that's about. Okay, and then we got some little virus sticks, and we've made a whole bunch of viruses. And eventually, boom, the cell blows up and more viruses pop out. That was a beautiful UC San Diego video. So a virus is like a little, I think of it as like an escape pod from a spaceship. It's like part of a spaceship. If a cell is a spaceship, it's just one little part of it, but it's not everything. And so is a virus alive? No, but it has about 3 of the properties that a living thing has. Check this out. Okay, so here's our little virus. What does he have going on that makes him alive? I think you could categorize this as a cell. It's actually made out of protein, so not exactly like a normal cell, but you could call that a cell. I would say yes, viruses have this going for them. Do they grow and develop? Not really, okay? They basically just look like that their whole life, okay? Are they organized? Yes, they're very organized. They're a protein. There's some DNA to make more viruses in there. Okay, do they reproduce? Yeah, they reproduce, but they need a host to reproduce, so I'd like give them a half credit for that one. Do they respond to stimuli? Definitely. If they attach to a host cell, they do things, okay? So they respond to certain stimuli. All right, do they use energy? No, they don't really use energy. They don't ever eat food, okay? Do they have homeostasis? Nah, they don't really have homeostasis. Do they evolve? Yes, they actually do evolve. That's why there's a new flu shot every year and all these different things. So you look at them and they're about halfway toward being a living thing. They're not quite all the way there. Now, notice I didn't fill in any of these words yet. I want to have a moment to talk to you about studying. Okay? I've watched kids for years do what they think is studying, where they just take their notes and they just read them. Made of cells, growth and development, organization, reproduce, blah, 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 blah. What are they practicing? They're practicing reading. But we haven't filled out any of these yet. I want to practice remembering right now. Okay, so we're going to fill all of these out, and I'm going to just pause for a second on each one, and I want you to think, do I know the answer to this one? Do I know the answer to this one? So cover up the answers and practice remembering right now. That's what it is to study. It's to practice remembering. So I'm going to go random on you. Number 5, living things notice what's happening around them and react to those changes. Response to stimuli. Okay, did you know that before I said it? Go ahead and pause the video before each one and see if you can remember it. Okay, number 2, living things start small and become larger, and they go through changes as they become more mature. Okay, do you know what this one is? Starting small, becoming larger. 3, 2, 1. Growth and development. Uh-oh, not enough space for that word. Okay, here we go. Let's go down to number 7. Living things keep their internal conditions steady even when the outside world is changing. Oh, this is that big, ugly new word you've never heard of. Starts with an H. Can you remember it? 3, 2, 1. Homeo. Do you remember the other part? Homeostasis. There you go. All right. Number 3, the parts of living things are arranged in a specific way so they can work together properly. Ooh, what's a nice fancy word to say that? Organization. All right, let's go up to number 1. Every living thing is built from tiny units. Oh, it's like it's made of cells. All right, go down to number 8. Groups of living things can slowly change over many generations. There's a big, scary word for that. It's called evolution. All right, number 4. Living things have the ability to make new individuals that are similar to themselves. Oh, do you know this one? Starts with an R. Reproduction. And finally, living things need power to do things like move and build and stay warm. I'm going to give you the first word, use of energy. Okay. Creationists believe there are limits to this. By the way, creationists know there are limits to biological change. You can turn a wolf into a coyote. You can turn a wolf into a poodle, but you're not going to take a poodle and go back to a wolf. You have lost a bunch of genetic information. All right, last one here. This thing is close to being considered alive, but doesn't meet all 8 requirements. That's a virus. All right, wrapping this bad boy up. In a Christian worldview, what is the difference between biological life and spiritual life? Okay, Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly. The longer I live, the more I think that this world that we're living in is less real than the eternal world that we're going to live in with God. That the spiritual, I think we tend to think about this backwards. We tend to think of the spiritual world as like the less real thing, and the physical world is the real thing. I think the physical world is a little bit of a hologram, and the real world is the spiritual world. So part of the reason that I think like maybe it's hard to define what life is exactly is because it's just kind of a hologram of what's actually real out there. That God's created a world for us to live in, but that it's only like a shadow of the real thing that we're going to live in with God someday in eternity. So Jesus came that we could have life, and like part of having life is being a physical living creature, but there's a spiritual component to life that is so much deeper and richer and even more profound than just being physically alive. Now, ultimately, Jesus was talking about becoming spiritually alive to God, that our sins could be forgiven, that we could be made right with God and be made alive to God. And he talks about this the Bible talks about this in another verse where it says, and it's prophesying of the time when Jesus would come, where God would remove our hearts of stone and give us a heart of flesh. And like all men, our hearts have grown cold to God, but when Jesus comes and makes us a new creation, our hearts become alive to God. And instead of having a heart of stone toward God, we have a heart of flesh toward God. And we become spiritually alive to the things of eternity and heaven. And I think real life is found in God and in Jesus. And so although there's principles of life or properties of life that make like creatures alive on the earth, true, ultimate, real life is only found in God. Those are my deep thoughts about that today. I hope this lesson blessed you, and I hope you're enjoying this curriculum. If you're still here watching, make a comment in the video. Tell me what you thought was interesting, and share what you're learning from watching these videos. Thank you so much for being a part of this with me. Peace out.